Hello YouTube, today I'm going to be making one of these really cool looking aliens from Invasion of the Saucer Men. It's a movie from 1957 and it's a black and white movie and it's sort of described as a comedy sci-fi or comedy horror. I think a lot of people went to see it at the time because of this cool poster, but in actual fact there's hardly any footage of aliens in it at all. Also, the aliens that are in the movie are slightly different looking to the ones in this poster. Like, obviously, in the poster, they look absolutely massive, like holding on to that woman like that. But in real life, in the movie, they're sort of about half the size of a human. They're quite small. They're also quite a lot lumpier and quite a lot veinier. And you'll see that in the model that I make in this video. I want my particular one to look much more like the ones in the movie. Right, I start in the same way that I normally do with a block of wood and some aluminium wire. This is 2mm aluminium wire, so I've just made a couple of holes in the wood using this little drill vise, and then I just put the wire down into it. I make the holes at an angle with this, and I think I did 2 holes on each side, and then just twisted the aluminium wire around itself. This 2mm aluminium wire is really easy to bend and twist around itself. The super glue is just used to stick it into the holes, and obviously these wire cutters are useful for snipping the wire at various points. You can see I twisted all up around to create that for the legs, and then this kind of loop for the body, and then one long one that goes right over for the arms, and then just more wire to kind of twist it all together, make it stronger, and another loop round for the head, and then more wire twisted round for the neck. This bit of wood is obviously longer than it's going to be for the base, but it allows me to kind of cut it down later. It's quite useful to have it this long while I'm working on it. Next, I take some kitchen foil or aluminium foil, and you're just crumpling it all up into that wire frame just to create the overall shape of your creature. In this case, a really nice little alien. You want to squash the aluminium foil up quite tightly and quite firmly. I'm going to be working over the top of this with a product called Milliput that I'll tell you more about as we go along. Obviously, if you choose to make one of these aliens as well, like me, you don't have to make it the size that I'm doing it. You could use thinner aluminium wire, and you could make a much smaller one if you wanted to. Right, I started off with those marbles and I realised they were too small, so I found some even bigger ones, and I'm going to swap them out and use these. You can see I've coated the whole alien with Milliput. Milliput is a 2-part putty. You mix the 2 parts together in equal amounts and it sets rock hard at room temperature in about 4 hours. I basically just press a very thin kind of sheet of it over the whole creature. You can see here I've left a couple of gaps to show you the aluminium foil through it. I'll add more Milliput into those gaps and smooth it all in. If you've got any kind of lumpy bits here and there, you just add more Milliput and keep smoothing it until you're happy with the overall shape. I really like this technique because it's really quick to do and it makes your figure really strong, and then obviously all of the details can be added over the top. This is just standard Milliput that I'm using for this because I'm going to be painting the model anyway, but you can buy black Milliput, you can buy turquoise blue Milliput, you can buy silver grey or metallic or superfine white. There's all or terracotta. There's all kinds of different colours of Milliput, and choose whichever one suits your project best. Okay, next I sculpted the upper eyelids and the lower eyelids. I did the kind of nasal slits, and then I did the lips and a sort of slight effect of teeth around a tongue kind of thing. That worked quite well. I was really pleased with the overall shape of that. I've also done some bits that look a bit like kind of cheekbones, and that adds to the kind of creepy look of it. By the way, in the UK, this movie had a different title. It was called Invasion of the Hell Creatures. Right, in the movie, the creatures have really lumpy heads, and I wasn't sure whether to just go for lumps or go for this kind of brain-like effect. So I decided to go for the brain-like effect. I just really love the way that this looks on a lot of different aliens. So I didn't mind using a little bit of artistic license because I end up being really pleased with the overall result on this one anyway. There are a lot of branching veins that kind of tuck in between all of the lumps, and I tried to match those a lot more accurately. By the way, in the movie, they have these kind of retractable needle fingernails and they inject alcohol into people, which is pretty cool. There's also like a hand that gets severed, and the hand kind of goes around doing the same thing, injecting people with alcohol. Right, next I had to make him some pointy ears, and that was just a case of, trying to match the two ears quite accurately and then sticking them on the side of the head. And what I did is I stuck them on and then I let the milliput dry and then I came in with more milliput and kind of blended them more into the head as a kind of way of strengthening it as well so that they don't get kind of knocked and bashed off. So they should be really, really, strongly attached now to the head. By the way, most of my sculpting is just done with a range of either ball styluses or kind of thin plastic sculpting tools, all of which you can buy really cheaply on eBay and things. So you can see here I sort of bulked out a couple of kind of pectoral muscle type shapes and then I did a kind of collar as well. And he has quite an elaborate kind of thing that goes around, as you can see here. Uh, and that was all built up just with these kind of like leaf type shapes. It's just a case of like rolling a ball of milliput and then, rolling it at one end so it goes to a bit of a point and then squashing it sort of flat. And then you kind of put one on and then you sculpt into it a little bit with a ball stylus and then you just repeat the process over and over until you end up with this kind of layered effect. I did the same for the sleeves and also on the sort of joints of the sleeves, like on the inside, I put some creases so it looks like fabric creases. And again, that's just a case of putting like a blob of milliput on there and then pressing into it with ball stylus or other kind of thin plastic sculpting tools. Okay, for the eyes, they weren't looking sort of angry enough, so I've added more milliput and created these kind of angled upper eyelids, and that really adds to the effect of him looking quite sort of mean and angry. Also, you can see I've added the hands here, and what I did was there was a bit of wire sticking at the bottom of each arm, and I twisted more wire onto that and then added a wire for each finger and the thumb, and then I've sculpted the milliput over the top. You can see I've put a whole load of like tendons and veins and things onto the hands, and also the fingernails I've done just with little bits of cut out plastic, very thin sheets of plastic stuck on with super glue. I made him a belt and I also made him a pair of shoes. Um, very simply done, very basic shoes, but they work quite well. And I think when it's all painted up, because the shoes are going to be black anyway, you're not going to see much of the detail on it. Also, you probably noticed on the hands, there's an eye on the center of each hand, on the upper part of the hand. That's a pretty cool touch, and when I come to paint this, I'll paint the eyes on his hands the same sort of colours as the eyes on his head. Right, stage one of the painting was literally just to paint the whole figure black. So I'm using System 3 acrylic paints for all of the painting stages on this. And yeah, it seems madness to paint it black initially because as soon as you paint it black, the whole thing looks very kind of flat. You lose a lot of the detail that you've just sculpted in because all of the dark places that are black blend in with all of the high places because they're also black. Okay, next stage, you can't really see this very clearly, but what I've done is I've dry brushed some very, very dark green over the top of a lot of this. So even when I zoom in with my camera here, probably you're just seeing that it all still looks just black basically. But let me assure you, in real life, you can see a hint of very dark green over the whole lot. It's just a starting point, and obviously I'm going to brighten and brighten and brighten as I go along, and the details will show up more and more. all of those details that I spent so long sculpting would all come back again. Right, this was dry brushing some fairly dark purple onto his sleeves and his belly, the little bits on his belt, like from his trousers, and then his actual trousers as well. Again, the camera's only just kind of picking it up, but you can see it just about. And again, I will brighten that purple later, but that's the first kind of stage. Next, I dry brushed gold paint onto his kind of collar and his sleeves. And it's always a good idea when you're using metallic paint to paint black first anyway, because black really makes the metallic paint show up and look really shiny. By the way, if you haven't done dry brushing before, you just take your paint on your brush and you rub it on a bit of kitchen paper until it's almost dry, and then you're just kind of dusting it over all the top surfaces. So here you can see I've added much brighter green to the head, and he's really starting to kind of pop now. The darker green still remains in all those kind of hollow bits, and obviously there are bits that are black as well. And yeah, they make all of those deep bits look really deep, and then all of the bright stuff that you do is looking like highlights, and then your creature just starts really coming to life. Okay, next I used yellow for the eyes. Now, when you're using yellow, it's quite a transparent colour, so a good tip is to mix a tiny bit of white in with it. That makes it much more opaque, and it means that it covers more easily. Otherwise, you will end up just doing so many coats of yellow to get it to actually look yellow. Right, then I've added the slit pupils. I've gone around the edges of the eyes with a bit of red and just kind of blended that into the yellow to soften it in. That works really quite well. I've done the same on the little eyes, and I've also dry brushed some brighter greens, very yellowy greens, onto the veins of the hands and the veins on the head as well. Obviously I sawed the ends off the base as well to make it smaller, and I've painted it red. Okay, you might find this stage a little bit strange, but I paint the whole thing apart from the eyes with a coat of PVA glue. Now this is wood flooring PVA glue, so it's really, really tough. And obviously when you first paint it on, it looks very white and opaque, but then it dries clear. And it gives a coat which is very slightly shiny, but it's not overly glossy. And what that does is it protects your whole figure. It makes it a lot stronger and tougher, but it also protects the paint layers that you've just put on. It means that if you were to scrape them against a wall or something, that acrylic paint won't scrape off. Okay, this is the final result, and you can see I've gone in, I've added some UV resin over the eyes, and that's made them really glossy. By the way, I did paint around the slit pupils with a bit of green as well, and that makes them kind of pop a bit more. I painted the lips pink, and I also added a bit of the UV resin onto the lips as well to make them glossy. I've gone over and I've added a much brighter purple, dry brushed that over the top of the PVA glue. And you can see with the fingernails, I painted them the same green as the green that goes around the slits for the pupils. And that's worked really well. And I added some UV resin onto the nails as well to make those glossy. So the whole thing really kind of pops a lot more now. I added a bit of pink in his ears as well, and that worked well. Right, I hope you approve of the end result. I obviously love monsters and gremlins and that kind of stuff, but I've been getting into aliens recently as well. And I've been collecting a lot of toys from the 60s and 70s that are alien related. Okay, hit subscribe to see anything that I post in the future. Thanks to Milliput for sponsoring this channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.